Sure. The forecast for the actual track of a storm are best made about 5 to 7 days out. And that's really comes from the National Hurricane Center. So taking the time to prepare now for any potential impacts can lessen can lessen the actualized impacts much later.
Right. Well, I meant like there are other outfits that put out season-wide predictions as to how many would make landfall, and obviously we can't really figure that out.
Yeah, NOAA does not issue a landfall forecast. That's something we're still looking into.
Great. All right, thank you.
All right, I'm going to try to come back over to Derek. Hang on just a second. Derek,
Hi.
there you go.
I'm here. Sorry about that. So, yeah, Matthew, I was just curious, are you guys at NOAA concerned about any kind of near coast kind of last minute development this particular season?
I mean, near coast and kind of rapid intensification just before landfall, that's something the Hurricane Center is always worried about with every storm. But as far as season-wide forecast of will they form closer to the coast or further out in the ocean, that's not really a forecast. There's not really skill in that kind of forecast. We're about 2 weeks out.
And then do you consider the MJO in your updated seasonal forecasts, just kind of as we're running into phase 1 and 2, it seems?
We do take into account what we call more broadly tropical intraseasonal oscillations, one specifically being the Madden-Julian oscillation, or MJO. And that kind of has led to this quiet period and to an active period coming up. But as far as season-wide, you tend to go through 1 or 2 full cycles of those. So season-wide, they don't have as great of an impact as kind of the 1 or 2 week periods.
Thank you, Derek. Our next question is one that comes in writing. From Jenny Staltovich. Can you please talk about the string of busy Atlantic hurricane seasons we're seeing and why that's occurring?
Sure. If this season becomes an active season, the forecast verifies, this will be the 6th consecutive active season. And that's really just in the background of we're in a high activity era. We've been there since 1995. The Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, as analyzed with the sea surface temperatures over the northern Atlantic, has been in a warm phase. So those temperatures have generally been above average since 1995. So any month-to-month average of the sea surface temperature in the Atlantic, they've all been positive. And that really just sets the stage for active seasons to happen much more frequently than inactive seasons.
Thank you. Next question comes from John Boyer with the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Do we see any trends with sea surface temperatures near the U.S. coastline, Gulf or East Coast, that would contribute to storms that intensify right up to landfall?
There are some above normal sea surface temperatures up off the northeast coast, but a lot of the temperatures near the southeast coast and the Gulf of Mexico have either been near normal. There's been some patches of below normal earlier in the summer. But that can change on a week-to-week basis, and you can get small periods of warm water, and if the storm can move over that small area of warm water, it can rapidly intensify. That's especially prevalent in the Gulf of Mexico with something called the loop current.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Laura Martinez. Her question is, does the Sahara dust that is happening right now have to do with no storms forming right now? And is Saharan dust keeping them away?
So the Saharan air that's out there now, it's probably contributing to lower amounts of storms right now. And if anything did come off, it might have a harder time forming. We've also seen an impact from the question that was asked earlier on the Madden-Julian oscillation. That's a tropical feature that moves through every 3 to 4 weeks. That was in an unfavorable position for Atlantic development for a couple of weeks. It's forecast to move to a more favorable position for development. So there's a kind of a number of factors that led to the recent quiet period.
Great, thank you. I have one more written question here. Just a reminder for our media partners, if you would like to ask a question, you may do so using the hand raise icon or typing your question in the questions box. Our next question comes from Carrie Duncan with WLOX Biloxi in Mississippi. Is there an area which looks more prone to activity? Does it look like there is another ridge over the Atlantic that will set up? Also, last year, the season went into November we went into November for the whole season. On the Mississippi Gulf Coast, we dealt with several near misses and then Zeta on October 28th, and we're still dealing with damage and cleanup. Does it look probable for more strong late season storms?
So as far as forecasting how many storms are close to the coast versus how many are out over the ocean, that's not really something that this outlook covers, because that's would kind of be more of a landfall forecast, and we don't issue a landfall forecast. The extending the season is a possibility, especially if we get a La Nina that does develop and has that atmospheric response from the Pacific that translates that response to the Atlantic. We could end up with some more late season storms. So taking the time to prepare now and then having those supplies on hand for the duration of the season is a smart move.
Thank you. I see a follow-up question here from Seth Borenstein. Seth, if you unmute your line, you should now be able to ask your question. Seth, are you there? All right, we'll come back around to that one. I also have a follow-up question from Kim Miller here with the Palm Beach Post. What analog years are you looking at this season?
I don't have them off the top of my head, but I can dig them up and get to you.
Okay, thanks. Let's see here. This one says, Colorado State said that Elsa might be a harbinger since it formed the Atlantic tropics so early in the season, and they pointed out that the 6 other years when such an early season hurricane formed in that region, including last year, happened to be hyperactive. Assuming that is true, why would that be?
So yes, every time that we have had a hurricane form in the Eastern Caribbean in June or July, it has resulted in an active season. When you can get a storm to form that early in the season, it does show that there's generally favorable conditions for an overall active season. It's just kind of one of the first tells for that year.
Great, thank you. Coming back to Seth. Seth, you should now be able to unmute your line.
Oh, yes. Yeah, finally. Thank you. Sorry about that. Matthew, what is the chance of exceeding the alphabet and going to the new backup names, exceeding the letters, the names, and going past Wanda? And is there a percent chance that we, 2%, 1%, whatever, that we match the record last year in terms of named storms? Have you calculated that chance?
No, I haven't calculated the chance of actually getting to 30 named storms. The current list has 21 named storms on it, and our forecast is for 15 to 21 named storms. And our outlooks are given within a plus minus 1 standard deviation, so about 70%. So that would imply that there's a 15% chance of exceeding the 21 named storms.
Thank you.
All right. That looks like it might be our last question. Let me just take a look here to make sure that there aren't any other reporters who have a hand raised. And I do not see any additional questions in the questions box at this time. Oh, here comes a couple. Anthony Carpino asks from WRDW in Augusta, Georgia, could you talk about the impacts that climate change has played in the hurricane season trends and overall trends?
Sure. So some of the major impacts from climate change are the increased intensity of storms. More storms are able to reach category 4 and 5 status. So that's one impact. Another impact is that when storms do form and then they make landfall, they are able to create more rainfall. And so they have about 3% more rainfall on any given storm. So that's a couple more inches in every storm usually. The wind speeds are also on average about 10% higher. And that's really because we have more of those, category 4 and 5s. And the other impact is that, so when you take a storm and you have the climate change induced sea level rise, that does increase your threat for coastal flooding. And that's really prevalent and really important for places like Savannah, Georgia.
Great, thank you. And I see one quick follow-up here from Kim Miller. For clarification, she asks, are you saying that there's a 15% chance of exceeding the 21 named storms, or is that, alternately a 15% chance of it being outside of the scope of the outlook itself?
So our forecasts are given with a 70% range. So there's a 30% chance of being outside of above or below, which means only a 15% chance of it being above the 21 named storms.
Great, thank you. All right, let's see here. If there are any additional questions that come in at this time, I do not see any additional hand raises. All right. So with that, I would like to thank Matt Rosencrans from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center for his expertise in delivering our updated seasonal outlook and providing us with this briefing today. A recording of today's remarks will be made available online at the bottom of our press release on NOAA.gov later this afternoon. And finally, if you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, Lauren Gacius, at 202-740-8314. Again, 202-740-8314. That concludes today's webinar. We thank you so much for joining us.